my name's Carol McGuigan. I'm the chair of Berlin Labour International branch. So Labour International is the constituency party that Labour Party members can join if they live outside the UK. So is anyone interested in that? Please see one of us afterwards. So as Labour Party members, we're dedicated obviously to seeing a Labour government in the UK. And as democratic socialists living in Berlin, we're interested in dialogue with other democratic socialists because we're internationalists and we believe that we can learn from and be in solidarity with each other. And some of us have or are seeking dual citizenship in Germany, so we naturally take more than an interest in politics here. So the idea for this evening came about because living here we were obviously concerned about the rise of the AfD and the attendant waning or stagnant support for left progressive parties. And although there were very welcome protests in Berlin and other places against fascism and racism, personally I couldn't see much being done to address, well, why are people turning to the AfD? What are the social conditions making people more vulnerable to these arguments? And it seemed to me that Aufstehen was seeking to engage in these social questions and walk into very difficult but important situations. Then I was aware that the reception to Aufstehen was very hostile, especially online, and this seemed largely to do with a prominent founder member and things that she had said previously. And what seemed to be being lost, though, was the social rationale behind the setting up of the movement. So it seemed important to me to try and have a civilized, comradely discussion about this movement and whether it can offer ways back from the pull of right populism and towards a social empowerment of people who feel unrepresented and unheard. And if people believe it can't do that, then why? Why do they feel that? Why is that? And is there anything else happening that does address these questions? So Phil of the Linke Internationals groups and I talked about it and have invited the speakers here on the platform. So Steve Hudson, founder member of Aufstehen, co-chair of Germany International, Germany Labour International rather, SPD member, DL 21 und Momentum member. And Christina Bucholtz, die Linke Abgeordnete, and Jerome Basharya of La France Insoumise. So the format is that each speaker will address us for 10 minutes with translation, some translation. Then we will open for contributions from the floor in which people can use whichever language they prefer, and there won't be translation, and then speakers will sum up at the end. So we aim to finish at 9:30, and those who wish to can continue the discussion in a nearby bar. So I'll pass over to Phil to introduce Jerome.
Okay, so very quick. I'll introduce myself. My name is Phil Dutton. I'm the joint speaker of the Linke Berlin Internationals. We attempt to get the non-Germans in Berlin involved in political activity here. This is the first meeting we've organised together with Labour Berlin, and hopefully it won't be the last. We're looking towards, especially with Jeremy Corbyn's Labour leadership, of the way in which we can work together in the future. The first speaker is Jerome Basharya. He is a member of our international group. He is also a member of La France Insoumise in France. He's going to explain the movement which is dividing us all at the moment, the French Yellow Vest movements, and also addressing some of the questions which have been raised about it. Show.
Okay. 10 minutes to speak about this movement is going to be very tough. It is the longest social movement since 1968 in France. The most repressive movement since the Civil War, named as well the Algerian War. So I will present the movement with what I think the origins of the movement, then I will talk about the Gilets Jaunes, and then the mode of action, the claims, and the government's answer. So the fiscal crisis. So the graphic showed the evolution of taxes over several decades. The conclusion is simple. What was previously paid by the capital income is now paid by households. So you can see in 1977, between the non-financial corporation and household, it was only 9.9 points. In 2017, it is 20 points. So the reason why the movement starts on a new tax is not a surprise. The permanent economic crisis. Since the middle 1980s, France had a high unemployment rate. Access to the Eurozone did not change the situation. Entire geographical areas have entitled themselves for their business. They prefer to locate the business where the wages conditions are more favorable for the capital. France is through the second country in terms of dividends paid to the shareholders in the world. 57 billion euros have been given to the shareholders last year. This area are formerly acquired by the French Communist Party. It is very well explained in the book of Didier Ribon. I don't know if some of you know Didier Ribon. He was very famous in Germany the last 2 years because of his book translated in German. And those areas are now very popular for the Rassemblement National. After the first French party, the abstention. Add to the localization problem, the state is not doing anything about the disappearance of the public service like public school, hospital, train station, causing a feeling that the promise of equality, one of the promises of the Republic, is broken. 9 million people living in poverty in France, 20% have problems to eat 3 times a day. And I think it's very important as well to don't forget the 2008 crisis to understand the movement. The political crisis. France is certainly one of the only countries where convicted elected officials can continue their political career without any problems. Good example, last week, Alain Juppé, former Prime Minister, was appointed in the, we call this Constitutional Court. He has been sentenced to 5 years of, he couldn't be in a political system for 5 years because of some fake jobs in the right party in the 90s. While still there are countless ministers and presidents who are the target of investigation, there are also the problem of senior officials who leave the civil service to work in the private sector and then return to work for the state, what we call the revolving doors. As a result, French citizens abandoned the polls, and almost insurrection political situation in terms of participation and results since the National Front, Rassemblement National, now continues to beat record after record. In 2002, Jean-Marie Le Pen had 5 million voters. In 2017, 10.6 for his daughter, Marine Le Pen. So you can see the abstention really went up, especially in the last European election. But the worst was undoubtedly the 2005 referendum on the European Constitutional Treaty. It happened as well in Ireland, in Portugal. Rejected by 50%, it will be validated to a similar content by legislative votes, thanks to Sarkozy. It's very important to understand the movements in France, the yellow movement. It's a very strong crisis of representation. They don't want to be represented anymore. It's very hard to understand for us who are involved in political party, but they really have big problems with that. They don't want to have someone who is going to negotiate for them, except if they have the entire control of this person. In the last election, the main traditional party did not manage to go in the second round. The Social Democrat made a score of 6%, and the Republican made it 20%, even if François Fillon was as well accused of corruption during this campaign. Even with this score, you can see that they have many MP in the National Assembly. On the top, you can see how the Assemblée Nationale looked today. The election is a 2-round voting system. It's taking only on the first round the two candidates on the top, except if we have a very high participation, you can have 3 candidates. I think in the last election it did not happen in one circumscription, but I'm not even sure of that. The second assembly is the second assembly if you have a full proportional. So it's a big difference. So people don't have the feeling they are represented in the parliament, and actually you see the reason here. The media crisis, I think it's in most of the modern democracy we have this problem. Many journalists in the beginning of the Gilets Jaunes movement were victims of violence. The Gilets Jaunes are complaining about the fact that Macron was supported by the main media and journalists. On the top, main media are talking non-stop about violence, anti-Semitism as well, new since last weekend. Big surprise, I think, for the Labour member. Coming from the Gilets Jaunes, when most of the demonstrators are peaceful. 90% of the media are owned by 9 billionaires, like you can see. If some of you know the media in France, you can see who is the owner of the media. On the top of that, the journalists who are working for this media, most of them are going to public media and then after going back to the private media. So you hear all the time the same propaganda. All these ingredients were there before Macron election, and I will finish with the last point of the origin of the Gilets, Macron himself. For most French and European citizens, Macron is an unknown when he becomes Minister of Economy in 2014. And yet his position is only one step in the strategy designed by the French oligarchs. Like a Berezovsky who launched Putin, Macron has been supported by oligarchs for years. Macron is from a provincial town, Amiens. He will move to Paris after meeting his wife, who left his family and children to support his new 24-year-old husband. Brigitte Macron is coming from a bourgeois regime who will introduce Emmanuel Macron into circles that will allow him to access the country's highest responsibilities. Macron goes through the ENA, the most prestigious school in the country, where Chirac, Villepin, Hollande and many other political responsible and so many senior civil servants and company CEOs have gone. It is a small world that is destined to govern France. Macron became a financial inspector. After 4 years, he left the senior's office for Rothschild. In France, when a citizen goes through the Grande École, he has to work for 10 years. If he leaves his position, he must reimburse the salary he has to receive until the end of his 10 years. This sum represents 50,000 euros when he left. In 18 months, Macron will become a millionaire. Between 2011 and 2012, he declared more than 2.4 million assets. He is a member of the Attali Commission for Growth and has been offered ministerial arbitrary position during Sarkozy terms. A member of the Social Party from 2006 to 2009. He wrote the economic program of François Hollande and became his Secretary General of l'Élysée. In private, he doesn't not hide his ambition to become President of the Republic. He met Bernard Arnault, French first fortune, and Xavier Niel, a French billionaire close to the people press, on whom Emmanuel Macron would rely to become President of the Republic. He became Minister of Economy and was already noticed for his arrogance and his contempt for class when he spoke with the workers. He left the government in 2016 to found the party En Marche. For his first election as a candidate, he became president. So this is Macron with his wife and Rothschild. So, after 18 months of the most liberal agenda, the lowest class did not accept a new tax, a fuel tax. During these 18 months, Macron did not listen to the trade unions, did not listen to the opposition, did not listen even different people in his own party. Macron cut the tax on the richest people of the country when he was adding some new tax on the poorest. In the first year, he gave 24 billion euros to the 10% richest in France. The reaction came from people living in a small city in the countryside where they need the car to go to work, pick up the children, go to the supermarket to fill up the fridge. At the first place, it was just a petition about the fuel tax, but in a couple of weeks, different videos on social networks were watched by millions of people. Mode of action differ according to the space and participants. In the province, stores are blocked. Some roundabout become agora, where many people will celebrate Christmas and the New Year. In the major city, demonstrations take place every Saturday. Last Saturday and next Saturday, still going on. During those demonstrations, different symbols of the French flag and the Marseillaise are used to place the movement in the long revolutionary movement. Other symbols of the Commune, Marianne, are used frequently. Blockage of different businesses like Carrefour, supermarket, Amazon, Tato. After a couple of weeks and the success of the mobilization, Priscilla Ludowski and different leaders launched a survey to give some political demands. In a couple of weeks, some people who have never been interested in politics start to ask some political demands. Most of the people, not most of the people, but a big amount of people get politicized in very, very short time in this movement. The claim, citizen initiative referendum, in addition to it would be triggered by 700,000 people, sign an online petition supervised by a recognized independent body, in addition to enforcing all scrapping legalization. The popular vote could also be held on international agreements or to host MPs or other elected officials. Zero homeless, income tax, more progressive, more slices, no pension below 1,200 euros, and many other. Most of them are about direct democracy and social justice, and almost nothing about immigration or Islam. The government response. For several weeks, the government locked itself in and refused to see the reality. It was not until the violence in early December that the government understood. Its first response will be repressive. As for many years now, France has been criminalizing demonstrators. The use of non-lethal weapons banned in many countries has caused hundreds of serious injuries in the beginning of the movement. 1,900 wounded. 1,700 arrested, 1,000 convictions, 180 injured at the head, 17 people who lost one of the eyes, 5 hands lost, 1 dead, and we can even add 12 more people on the top of this one. People were actually blocking the tolls and actually died by accident because they were fighting for the interest of all of us. In a couple of weeks, people are sent to jail. When you probably know, Monsieur Benalla and some other people like Sarkozy are still free. In some cases, they are not judged for their crime, but sometimes just because of their suspicion. Other numbers, 70 people find the movement justified. Some other surveys show 60% of support. It's always between 60% and 80% support from the population. 30% understand the violence coming from the Gilets Jaunes. It's a huge number. The second answer was political, far from the claims of the Yellow Vest, of course. Fuel tax has been abandoned, and thanks to hacking, some categories of workers and pensioners will have an increase of few dozen euros. If some Yellow Vests stopped the movement at that time, it continues at high level. The major debate organized, le Grand Débat, organized by the government, will be used by Emmanuel Macron to campaign for the European at the taxpayer expense. In conflict with the media, they will try to make the Yellow Vests look like an extreme right movement, while various studies and polls show desire for more social justice and democracy. I will finish with a bishop from Brazil who said, there are 3 kinds of violence. The first, the mother of all of them, is institutional violence. The violence that legalizes and perpetuates domination, oppression, and exploitation. The violence that crushes and destroys millions of people in silence and well-oiled machinery. The second is revolutionary violence, which is born of the desire to abolish the first. The third is repressive violence, the purpose of which is to stifle the second by becoming an auxiliary and accomplice to the first violence, the one that generates all the other. There is no greater hypocrisy than to call violence the second, pretending to forget the first, which gives birth to it, and the third, which kills it. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you ever so much for that, Jerome. It was really enlightening and quite startling as well, some of those statistics about the injuries. The next speaker is Steve Hudson. So as I said, Steve is also a member of the Labour Party. He lives in Köln, and he's also a member of Momentum. He also joined, I think was it last year, the SPD, and is a member of DL 21, and he's a founder member of Aufstehen. So that's basically the reason why we've invited him to talk this evening. So please, Steve.
So, good evening. I've never actually done anything about Aufstehen in English, and I'm a little bit unused to it, and I know that sometimes actually hearing people who aren't English talking English is easier to understand than people who are English talking English. So if there's anything, just stick up your hand, don't be shy, and I'll say a couple of words in German to fill in the gap. Habt ihr das verstanden? So, super. Yeah, so I joined Labour when I was 16. I was out at 18. I went to university. We had a thing called the poll tax. Thatcher wanted a flat tax. Everybody should pay exactly the same tax to fund local government. And Britain was up in arms because it was so fundamentally unfair. And there was a huge big campaign, can't pay, won't pay, non-payment of the poll tax. Millions of people didn't pay. I was involved in that, and the Labour Party had nothing better to do than to try with all its might to suppress this campaign. And I was out of there, and really, it was just, for 20 years I've actually met someone who said they were from Labour. It was like, ugh! It was just so deeply disappointing and horrible. And I left, and I was wrong. You know, a couple of old guys sort of stuck it out, like, keep the red flag flying in. You've got to be kidding. And, you know, there were people like John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn. And then suddenly in 2015, there's a Labour leadership election, and they changed the rules. Suddenly, it's direct democracy. It's one member, one vote. Everybody gets a vote. And we've got, like, you know, 3 other guys with fantastic fingernails, great smiles, really good sort of sound bites. And you've got Jeremy Corbyn, who was always against the wars and always against the cuts. And in 6 weeks, 150,000 people joined the Labour Party, and he was voted in with an overwhelming landslide majority to lead the party, not just by these new members, but by the old members as well. You suddenly see that Great Britain, where we thought, oh God, Britain, never anything going to happen here, I'll go live in Germany. So actually the third, because we are living on the brink of a catastrophe. Yeah? Climate collapse is coming. We've got 12 years. Inequality is spiralling to obscene levels. It's a man-made crisis, just like the climate crisis, which is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. 25 billionaires own as much as half of the world put together. In the last year, they got 12% richer. The bottom half got 11% poorer. It's not very difficult to do the maths where they got the money from. Governments have been actively transferring wealth from the bottom to the top. And it's not just wealth, it's power. And that's why direct democracy, suddenly, one member, one vote, bang, it all exploded. And where we thought we had this ossified, crusty old system where nothing would ever change, suddenly a door opened and then everything is possible. And we've seen the same thing in the States, where suddenly people have realised you've got the machine politics of the Democrat Party, but you know what? It doesn't take actually that many people. We can go out on the streets and we can campaign, and maybe Bernie loses, but then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to win, and then maybe next time around Bernie's going to win, and everything is possible. There is everything to play for. And this hope, you can win, the German left has completely forgotten. Completely. The idea you could win. You know, the Linke on, you know, the SPD, self-destruct. I joined the SPD, I ran the local e-foul campaign against the Grand Coalition last year. You know, on Facebook, just a couple of sort of volunteers, we walked it. And we just, what the SPD tried to post. We had as much reach as the SPD official site, you know, backed up by legions of staffers. We had just as much reach, and everything that we posted out, we had in 1 week, we had 1 million views. The SPD, they did whatever they posted, it was just, it was just the comments underneath were appalling to see. Whereas, you know, everything, people desperately want change, and yet the left in Germany has completely, if I may say so, completely failed to articulate this profound desire for change. And a lot of those people are going to the extreme right, which is not good. I hope we're all agreeing, yeah? And at the same time, you've got, and because of the electoral system, which is different, you know, in both Britain and America, we have basically two-party systems. So it's always been possible, you know, back from, everybody's still bitter here about 1914 and 1918 and 1919 and wars of Luxembourg, and all these things, everybody's still really upset. But all that energy has always meant that new parties have been founded. And it's very understandable. I would have joined another party. There was no future for me in Labour already in the early 90s. I was out. And I probably would have joined another party, but there just wasn't one available, so I emigrated. But here you've had these other parties. So you've had, you know, the Spartakisten and the KPD and then the Greens and the VRSG and whatever. And with the result, bang, 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 each time it creates a party bureaucracy, you know, we have the iron law of oligarchy, das Ehrengesetz der Oligarchie. People live from politics, not for politics. That is also, unfortunately, a thing. And everybody starts defending their little fiefdom, and you end up with a little series of campfires. Yeah, well, I'm here, and, well, we don't like them. And this is really endemic to the left. Yeah? So I don't want to be rude, but like with Corbyn and Labour, I'm being rude. It's in English, you say, if you're about to be rude, you start by saying, I don't want to be rude, but. So with Corbyn and Labour, actually, a lot of the really great stuff is not necessarily the old members who've been kind of slogging it out year in year. It's all these new members. They don't really care if you're a Trotskyist or a Stalinist, and then, you know, and the Trotskyists have got so many splits. You know, there's those Trotskyists against those Trotskyists, and they have very different positions on the Near East. You know, and they just don't care. They want a government which is going to stop the cuts and stop the wars, which is a good thing, right? And I would appeal to you. So I was in Berlin last summer. There was a Labour shadow minister here. And I bumped in from someone from the Linke and said, we're going to do the social movement. It's going to be for Frieden und Gerechtigkeit, for peace and social justice. I am not a member of the Linke. To be honest, every time I come near, all the internal fractional stuff is kind of, ooh, yeah, it doesn't, a lot of people being unpleasant to each other, doesn't seem like a lot of fun. And, you know, we've got problems inside Labour as well, serious problems, but it doesn't seem like much fun. I'm not, you know, a fan of Sarah Wagenknecht. I do not follow the amount of people who read stuff religiously, everything she writes in order to criticise it is astonishing. She is imbued with magical powers, that she's taken over people's heads, and she's sort of, you know, it's, to be honest, a slightly sexist archetype going of some sort of ice queen who has got a sort of amazing manipulative faculty. I am not, frankly, interested. The Aufruf, the call to action for Aufstehen was about Frieden und Gerechtigkeit. It's not about migration. Yeah, there are different points of view on migration. Frankly, I think Labour's point of view on migration at the moment, I don't think is very good. It's friending free movement. Yeah, but I don't see people complaining about Jeremy Corbyn within the Linke. I don't agree with Wagenknecht. I think that by creating a category of illegal immigrants, that you split the working class. You know, that these people are made more precarious. But for God's sake, I want something to happen. And if someone else, if Katja Kipping had asked me, I'd have gone along with that one too. I'm not that bothered. The world is going to die in 12 years. Inequality is that big. And everybody sat around their little campfires going, yeah? And then we have, like my wife's family comes from Paderborn. I'm all right for time, yeah? They come from the countryside near Paderborn. Now, if you've been to the countryside in Ostwestfalen-Lippe, to little villages, there aren't a lot of left-wing people there, yeah? But if you talk to them, they are not rich people. And they've all got diesels. They've not got diesels because they hate the environment. And they go shopping at Aldi, they don't go shopping for bio, you know, organic food because they don't care about that. Frankly, they can't afford it. The bus goes 3 times a day to the village. If you want to go to work, If you want to go and pick up the kids, you've got to go with a car. So they all buy cheap diesels because they're cheaper to run. Just like the Gilets Jaunes. Yeah? Macron whacked on this fuel tax, having cut wealth tax, abolished wealth tax, having cut taxes for the rich. And this fuel tax that we imposed on the French people, it didn't go to some special eco-fund. No, it just went into the general tax fund. So they, diesel drivers, poor people in the countryside in France, were meant to be financing Macron's tax cuts for the rich. Yeah? And yet, oh, they're all anti-eco, they're all against some ecological impulse. No, they're not against it, they just can't afford it. And that is the thing, if you actually go and read what they're saying, they don't, well, they want to stop all these hypermarchés, which, you know, these huge supermarkets we're being built out of town, because you only go shopping in your car these days. All the little shops, like it is in the countryside in Germany, all the little shops have all closed down. You can't walk to the shops anymore. So this is the thing, how do we actually talk to people who live in the countryside and who probably haven't met very many foreigners? Now, we all know that phenomenon, that racism is usually strongest in places, or hatred of, or not, well, fear of migrants is usually strongest in the places where there aren't very many migrants. Now, I'm born in London, and I live in Cologne, both multicultural cities. It's just not an issue. And I'm sure it's mostly the same in Berlin. I've never lived here, yeah? But it is different out in the countryside. But often, you know, the way they greet people. When my mum grew up in Somerset, she saw her first black man when she was 15. And the greeting was something like, you know, that's it. And she honestly didn't know. Now, this is not because they are morally bad people. Yet we have developed a reaction on the left. We have two ways of reacting to racism. And the first is, yeah? And the other is, run away! Yeah? And we see that with all the Gelbfest and the Gilets Jaunes, the yellow vests, I don't know what you can call them in English, but when they're out in the streets, you know, yes, there are fascists and racists among them, as there are fascists and racists within our society. What are you going to do about it? If you say, well, no, there might be a racist, yeah, it's like a hygienic impulse. I don't want to dirty myself with any of this. So quickly run away and leave this movement, this incredible social movement which has risen up with the demand for direct democracy, that these huge fundamental inequalities in our society will finally be overthrown. Well, we're going to leave them to the extreme right. I'm sorry, that is not a very clever idea. We have to go in and we have to talk to people. And this is the problem. A lot of the people, let's say, around Paderborn, I'm doing the people of Paderborn a huge injustice, but of many people in parts of Germany who are simply not used to migrants, is if they say, oh, ich weiß aber nicht, yeah? If they're worried about the Flüchtlingsheim because they've read something in the Bild-Zeitung, so if they're worried about the refugee accommodation because they've read something in Bild, either there's this hysterical, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, or not going to talk to you. It is possible to change people's minds. If you look at, say, the work of the Los Angeles LGBT Center, they did this active canvassing, talking to people about gay marriage, talking to people about transphobia. By engaging people in a serious conversation, it is possible to change people's minds. And that's something that we seem to have forgotten. And if I talk, like my mother-in-law, she comes from there. She's really pissed off about pensions. You know, it is simply too low. There are so many pensions there living on less than €1,000 a month. They can't do it. Yeah? There are so many people there, you know, whose jobs are precarious, who are doing 2 or 3 jobs, both mother and father are working, they've somehow got to juggle with getting kids to, you know, to care centres in the day. It's really tricky. Yeah? We need to talk to them. We need to be winning them for the left, because if you do not win them for the left, they will be won by the right. And the right are out there. And it's not difficult. There is a narrative that we can tell. Because there are 2 questions. And actually, that's why we've been doing lots of stuff with Yellow Vests and stuff like that. It's really cool, because it's really simple. Do you want to kick down to people who are worse off, or do you want to kick up? The power's up there. And if you pose that question, so many people, and they can be from, you know, they can be protest voters who want to vote for the AfD, they say, no, I want to kick up. And then they understand we will only win. We will only win if we all stand together. It doesn't matter what sex you are, it doesn't matter what sexuality you are, it doesn't matter what race or where you come from. The only thing that is going to guarantee our success is standing together. And then it doesn't become a moralising question. It becomes a question of a desperately needed hope of winning. And hope of winning is what it's all about. When people see, God, all I've got to do is put on a yellow vest, go down to a roundabout and set fire to a tyre, and I can push back against Macron, they'll do it. But we have failed on the left to offer people that chance of change. In Britain it came when people see, oh, I just need to pay a few pounds and I can join the Labour Party and vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I'll do it. And then when the MPs tried a coup against him a year later and all the papers were against him, people said, you know what, I can't trust the news media. They're all just trying, it's just such a load of fake news against Corbyn all the time. You know what, I'm going to go online. I'm going to start campaigning for Corbyn. I'm not going to accept it. And there is such power out there. And that power at the moment in Germany has only been channeled by the far right. Yeah? Every time that Olli Welke goes onto the Heute Schule and sort of makes fun of Saxon accents and says they're all AfD and they're all racists, you can just see the people queuing up to join far-right sides. We are driving voters into their arms. And I think I've got to finish, but we live in a country, in Germany, and I think it's probably even more, and Britain is a terribly class-ridden society. But in Germany, we have a social apartheid. 50% of people go to grammar schools, gymnasium, and 50% of people don't. And the political parties are by and for and with the people who went to grammar schools, and most of you went to universities. Yeah? And maybe it's completely different by the Linke, and I really hope it is. But if you go down to the SPD, well, first of all, you're lucky if you get to talk about national politics at all. But if you do, then it's this really abstract, intellectual stuff. And where is the space for someone to say, I have to eat from a food bank? Where is that space? Are those people genuinely welcome? Because we need to build an alliance of care and of love for one another. And unfortunately, in this intellectual atmosphere, what you have now is a vehicle for the educated to rule over the rest. And that extends across the party spectrum. So I'd appeal to you. If Aufstehen works or doesn't work, I don't care. Something's got to happen. Whatever comes along, I'll try. I go out the door in Cologne, in the centre of the city, in the morning, and there are pensioners plucking 8-cent beer bottles out of the trash. Yeah, by now they've got little torches and little hooks to get them out. Yeah, 100 bottles. You know what that weighs? How dirty that is. And you get €8. It's not even minimum wage. Yeah, and it takes a lot longer than an hour if you're lucky enough to get 100 bottles. I go out the door in Cologne in the morning with the dog, and there are people sleeping on the street, and that has to stop. And this is a language that we need to find. Sorry, this stops now. And the Gilets Jaunes, their first thing, keine Obdachlosigkeit, no more homelessness. It stops now, and that is what I care about. I don't care about some position of, yeah, well, Zara Wagenknecht, Oscar Lafontaine, well, in 1993 he said something that was silly. Yeah, probably. I just care about what works. Now, maybe Aufstehen won't work. I'm doing my best. But I invite you, all of you, we need to über unserem eigenen Schatten springen, which is to get over ourselves. We need to get over ourselves and make something happening, because change is coming. The school kids are on strike. That's a pre-revolutionary moment. It's such a radical act for a kid to go on strike. Something has to happen, and we have to show there is genuine possibility for everybody, not just the school kids, and they're mostly people who go to the posher grammar schools, more engaging with abstract ideas like climate change. We need to show that kids who have to rely on food banks, that pensioners who have to live with plucking beer bottles out of bins, that they are welcome, that they have a voice, that their contribution is also our contribution, that they are just as valuable as we are. As socialists, that's what we owe them, and I would appeal to you all, whatever you do, whether it's Aufstehen, whatever, get one of these. This is a sign of hope. And just because there was one racist down the road, if you run away from this, you're running away from the revolution. Paul Mason wrote recently, I'm not brainy enough to have read all this stuff, but there was a big difference between Rosa Luxemburg and Lenin. Lenin believed in the vanguard party, that essentially the masses were only going to rise up because the clever party told them what to do. And Rosa Luxemburg said, no, the masses are going to rise up because modern life is no longer acceptable. And Rosa was right. That's what we're seeing today. And that's not our job as a party to say, well, you've got to follow me. Our job is to go out and say, I'm with them. I'm with them, I'm with you. We can do better. Let's change the world.
A little bit flexible with time because we're not translating and we've got things to say. The last speaker is going to be Christina Bucholtz. Christina is an MP for the Linke. She's a member of the party national executive. For people who came late, Christina's going to speak in German. If you have problems with German, we've got all sorts of people here who will translate it for you, and there's a few seats here. So, yeah, if you want to know. And Christina, the translators asked, can you have pauses so they can, translate properly.
Okay, ich versuche es, und wenn ihr mir das vorher gesagt hättet, hätte ich auch meinen Beitrag auf Englisch vorbereitet, aber jetzt ist es auf Deutsch, vielleicht kann ich nachher auch auf Englisch reagieren. Vielleicht vorneweg, ich glaube, dass die Entwicklung in Frankreich, die Gilets Jaunes, eine absolut wichtige Entwicklung war. Wir haben auch als Linke uns mit diesen Protesten sofort solidarisiert und die Repression, die ausgeübt worden ist, scharf kritisiert. Und ich glaube, es ist auch wichtig, dass Linke in Frankreich Teil dieser Bewegung sind, weil es natürlich auch darum geht, diese Bewegung zu unterstützen, aber auch in der Bewegung für richtige Forderungen, linke Forderungen und auch gegen Rassismus, Verschwörungstheorien und andere Ideologien zu kämpfen, die letztendlich schädlich sind für so eine Bewegung. Deswegen glaube ich, ist der Platz von Linken in Frankreich selbstverständlich Teil dieser Bewegung und wie gesagt, die Linke hat sich solidarisch erklärt mit dieser Bewegung. Das Zweite, was ich sagen möchte, ist, dass ich sehr, sehr beeindruckt bin. Ich habe die Politik in Großbritannien auch viele Jahre verfolgt und der Schwung und die Dynamik, die Jeremy Corbyn entfacht hat und die vielen, vielen Menschen, die zu Labour geströmt sind, das ist eine absolut wichtige Entwicklung, die wir auch als Linke hier sehr stark reflektiert haben, weil es gezeigt hat, dass es einen absoluten Bedarf gibt, etwas von der klassischen neoliberal gewendeten, also eine Alternative zur klassischen neoliberal gewendeten Sozialdemokratie zu machen. Und ich glaube, wir sind uns hier auf dem Podium einig, dass es Protest, Widerstand, Klassenkämpfe gegen diese neoliberale Politik braucht und dass es selbstverständlich ist, dass diejenigen Menschen, die am meisten unter dieser Politik leiden, als Erwerbslose, als Arbeiterinnen, als Arbeiter in unterschiedlichen Bereichen, dass die Subjekte der Veränderung sein müssen. Das möchte ich vorneweg sagen und ich glaube auch, dass wir uns erstmal einig in der Aufgabenstellung sind, dass das Stoppen der extremen Rechten in Europa und in Deutschland, das Stoppen des Aufstieges der AfD, das Zurückdrängen der AfD, dass es eine existenzielle Frage für uns auch ist als Linke. Und ich glaube nur, die Frage, wie wir das konkret auf die Situation in Deutschland bezogen diskutieren, dass wir da komplett unterschiedliche Einschätzungen haben. Und jetzt mache ich kurz mal
Platz, falls jemand es nicht versteht, dass wir dazugehen, weil du redest mit so einer Energie, also ich habe es auch aufgeschrieben, aber ich werde den Faden verlieren, wenn ich das nicht gleich.
Ich kann auch anbieten, simultan zu dolmetschen, vielleicht dann insgesamt weniger Zeit.
Ja, okay.
Ja?
Okay.
Yeah?
Well, perhaps you could translate the last bits while we're sorting this out.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just...
Or just with the answer.
At the end,
Yeah.
What you just said.
Yeah.
Okay, mache ich weiter. Ich werde gleich das vielleicht ein bisschen thesenhaft machen, weil ich glaube, wir müssen uns schon sehr mit der Situation in Deutschland selbst beschäftigen. Und ich glaube, all die Ansprüche und Anforderungen, die Steve eben sehr plastisch dargestellt hat, entsprechen nicht dem, was meiner Einschätzung der der Bewegung Aufstehen ist. Und ich möchte an mehreren Punkten deutlich machen, warum ich glaube, dass wir eine komplett andere Situation haben, dass wir andere Antworten finden müssen, wie wir gemeinsame Schritte machen, sowohl gegen Sozialabbau und soziale Spaltung zu kämpfen und den Rechtsruck zurückzudrängen. Das erste, meine These ist, dass in Deutschland die Linke letztendlich die Sammlungsbewegung war, die jetzt ein Stück weit nachgeholt wird in anderen Ländern. Wir hatten den Einschnitt in Deutschland mit der rot-grünen Bundesregierung, mit der Agenda 2010, die zu einer massiven Bewegung auf der Straße geführt hat. Wir hatten die Proteste, viele waren von euch wahrscheinlich auch schon hier, wir hatten die Proteste gegen die Hartz-IV-Reformen, wir hatten die Montagsdemonstrationen, wir hatten Brüche innerhalb der SPD, die tatsächlich rein ins gewerkschaftliche Lager vor allem gingen, und wir hatten in dem Zusammenhang, in diesem Kontext hat sich die Parteigründung der Linken vollzogen, als einer Partei, die im Westen stark gewerkschaftlich und aus sozialen Bewegungen kommend war und im Osten aus der damaligen PDS. Ich glaube, dass wir sehen müssen, dass die Sammlungsbewegung war, die letztendlich einen entscheidenden oder einen wichtigen Umschwung auch gebracht hat, als Bezugspunkt für Linke in Deutschland, die sich letztendlich auf diese Linke bezogen haben. Der Einschnitt, den die Agenda 2010 bedeutet hat, macht uns heute noch zu schaffen, und wir haben viele Kämpfe, soziale Kämpfe in Krankenhäusern, in Kommunen gegen die Privatisierung von Wohnraum, die Folge dieser Politik sind. Das Zweite, was ich sagen möchte, ist, Aufstehen versucht jetzt 10 Jahre später dieses Momentum zu wiederholen, und ich glaube, dass es aus gewissermaßen anzuknüpfen an auch Bewegungen, die international laufen. Ich glaube aus mehreren Gründen, das funktioniert nicht. Und Steve, wenn du hier auch sehr deutlich oder sehr, sehr hohe Ansprüche formulierst, dann musst du auch über eine Bilanz der Bewegung reden, musst darüber reden, dass man versucht hat, die Gilets Jaunes gewissermaßen zu kopieren. Letzte Woche Wochenende sind, glaube ich, 2000 Leute bundesweit auf der Straße gewesen. Und ich glaube, man kann keine Bewegung importieren, man kann nicht die Situation, wie sie in anderen Ländern ist, kopieren auf eine Situation, wie sie in Deutschland ist. Und wir müssen sehen, dass wir als Ergebnis eines jahrelangen neoliberalen Raubaus in Deutschland, wo die Agenda 2010 ein wichtiger Teil war, wir eine Spaltung haben und gleichzeitig eine Situation wegen der wirtschaftlichen Sondersituation in Deutschland, in Europa, dass wir momentan keine großen verallgemeinerten Angriffe, anders als in Frankreich, haben und gleichzeitig keine Klassenkämpfe, keine großen Klassenkämpfe neben sozusagen den vielen wichtigen kleinen lokalen Kämpfen und auch Kämpfen in einzelnen Bereichen, wie beispielsweise in den Krankenhäusern, die ein vergleichbarer Rückenwind für eine Bewegung wären, wie es damals die Proteste gegen die Agenda 2010 und gegen die Hartz-IV-Reform waren. Das, finde ich, muss man erstmal konstatieren, weil man muss sich eine ehrliche Rechenschaft über die politische Lage und über die Situation hier in Deutschland ablegen, wenn man überlegt, wie man auch Erfahrungen, die man anderswo gemacht hat, übertragen kann. Und ehrlich gesagt, mir mutet es grotesk an, wenn ich also die Fraktionsvorsitzende meiner Fraktion in einer gelben Weste alleine vor dem Kanzleramt stehen sehe. Das als großes Bild auf eurer Homepage, das zeigt den Widerspruch. Es gibt diese Bewegung hier nicht. Natürlich wollen wir sie, aber die Frage ist, wie kommen wir dahin, dass wir auch eine verallgemeinerte Bewegung gegen Neoliberalismus und gegen soziale Angriffe bekommen? Ich glaube nicht, dass es auf diese Art und Weise geht. Man kann keine Bewegung von oben initiieren, die nicht angedockt ist an wichtige Teile vom außerparlamentarischen Protest. Und das ist sozusagen meine zweite Kritik. Wir arbeiten als Linke sehr stark, und ich mache das auch schon seit Jahren in verschiedenen Bereichen, dass wir sehr, sehr eng mit sozialen Bewegungen, in Gewerkschaften, in antirassistischen Bewegungen arbeiten, als Teil dieser Bewegung. Wir haben immer für unser Recht auch gestritten, dass wir auch als Partei Teil von Bewegungen sein können und gleichzeitig auch unsere eigenen Positionen und Forderungen treten können. Aber das, was ich erlebe, was in der Realität unter dem Label Aufstehen passiert, ist, dass man sich draufsetzt auf Bewegung, aber nicht organischer Teil der Entwicklung von Bewegungen und Kämpfen ist. Ich möchte es an einem Beispiel deutlich machen. Wir haben hier in Berlin sozusagen die Initiative hier mit der Enteignet Deutsche Wohnen. Das ist ein großes Bündnis, es wird sogar von der Linken unterstützt. Was hat es? Nein, es wird sogar von der Linken, das finde ich wichtig, weil anders als in der Vergangenheit hat die Linke, die hier in der Regierung ist, auch eine problematische Politik in Bezug auf die Privatisierung von Wohnraum gefahren. Und dass sie jetzt Teil dieser Bewegung ist, selbst in der Regierung, das wollte ich damit deutlich machen, ist absolut wichtig. Für mich ist es selbstverständlich, dass man Teil einer solchen Bewegung sein muss. Die Gruppe von Aufstehen hat sich sozusagen des Labels bemächtigt, eine Aktion vor der Geschäftsstelle der Deutsche Wohnen gemacht, nicht abgesprochen mit den Initiatoren der Kampagne. Und ich finde, das geht nicht. Das geht nicht. Das hat total Irritationen geführt. Und natürlich ist das kein Verständnis von dem, wie ich die Rolle auch sehe von dem kollegialen und solidarischen Aufbau von Bewegungen. Du hast gesprochen über die Linke, du hast sie karikiert als sozusagen einen, ich kann das jetzt nicht wörtlich übersetzen, aber als einen langweiligen Haufen vergleichbar mit der SPD. Und ich will ein differenziertes Bild davon zeigen. Okay, vielleicht noch einen Punkt zurück, weil ich finde, was wir nicht vergessen dürfen, wenn wir über Bewegung reden. Reden wir über die größte Bewegung, die momentan in Deutschland oder die sich letztes Jahr in Deutschland gegeben hat. Das war der Sommer des Antirassismus. Das waren die 250.000 Menschen, die in Berlin unter dem Hashtag Unteilbar demonstriert haben. Und ich weiß auch, dass es Menschen gab, die Aufstehen unterstützen, die sich nicht dem Votum von einigen Leuten an der Spitze angeschlossen haben, nämlich sich nicht an der Demonstration, sich zu entsolidarisieren von der Demonstration. Ich finde das sehr gut, ich habe das auch sehr begrüßt, aber es zeigt schon ein Problem, dass da, wo momentan die größte Bewegung, die größte Dynamik passiert, dass es keine organische Verbindung von Aufstehen mit dieser Bewegung geht. Und das ist anders mit der Linken als Partei, wobei ich auch durchaus einen sozusagen kritischen Blick und auch eine Herausforderung sehe, wie wir als Linke auf die Herausforderungen reagieren können. Aber ich glaube, sozusagen einfach die Karikatur zu zeigen, die Linke ist sozusagen ein langweiliger Haufen, der vor allen Dingen sich dadurch auszeichnet, dass er interne Streitigkeiten irgendwie auszufechten hat, wird der Realität nicht gerecht. Wir haben eine Partei, die in den letzten 2 Jahren gewachsen ist. 17.000 Mitglieder, übrigens sind 2/3 der Mitglieder unter 35 Jahre. Wir haben wir haben natürlich ein völlig unterschiedliches Bild in unterschiedlichen Landesverbänden, in unterschiedlichen Kreisverbänden. Wir haben gerade in Hessen, das ist mein Landesverband, haben wir sehr viele, sehr aktivistische, sehr eng mit lokalen Bewegungen verbundene Kreisverbände und aktiven Strukturen. Und wir haben gleichzeitig ein Problem, was übrigens auch Labour und übrigens auch Labour unter Corbyn auch in Zukunft haben will, noch mehr, wenn er auch noch irgendwann in der Regierung sein würde, nämlich, dass es natürlich das Problem der Parlamentarisierung gibt und eine Fokussierung von einer parlamentarischen Partei auf Wahlen, eine Fokussierung einer parlamentarischen Partei auf Mandate und all diese Dinge. Bloß ich verstehe einerseits nicht, warum du glaubst oder du zumindest den Eindruck erweckst, dass das ein Phänomen sei, was dann auch der Corbyn-Labour-Partei irgendwie völlig fremd sein sollte. Und vor allen Dingen frage ich mich, wie man dann dazu kommt, sozusagen an einem Regierungsprogramm zu arbeiten, dessen Skizze ich jetzt eben mal mir auch angeguckt habe, also was zumindest jetzt, was die inhaltliche Grundlage auch wirtschaftspolitisch sozusagen weit hinter dem zurückliegt, was ich jetzt als Linke für Minimum irgendwie halten würde, aber was ein Regierungsprogramm sein soll. Ich glaube, ohne die Kräfteverhältnisse in diesem Land tatsächlich von unten zu verändern, wirst du auch an der Regierung keine fundamentale Änderung herbeiführen können. Und von daher glaube ich, die ganze Orientierung auf ein Regierungsprogramm, auf eventuell dann sozusagen eine Kanzlerschaft, von wem auch immer, kann man sich dann ja irgendwie fantasieren, finde ich, ist eine völlig falsche völlig falsche Orientierung angesichts der Herausforderungen, die wir bei der Entwicklung von sozialen Kräfteverhältnissen haben. Der Punkt, der mir vielleicht hier an der Stelle am wichtigsten ist die Frage, wie reagieren wir auf den Aufstieg der AfD. Und ich finde wichtig nochmal zur Analyse, dass wir mit dem Aufstieg der AfD eine Situation haben, dass in Deutschland eine Partei, in der Nazis und Faschisten immer mehr an Einfluss gewinnen. Eine Partei, die inzwischen gerade in Ostdeutschland, aber natürlich auch jetzt im Bundestag relevante Prozentsätze gewonnen hat, dass wir so ernsthaft darüber reden müssen, wie wir diese Partei zurückdrängen müssen. Und ich sehe deinen Anspruch absolut, dass wir die AfD zurückzudrängen. Ich glaube aber, dass die Verkürzung auf wir müssen anders mit den Menschen reden und Politik wieder für sie greifbar und verständlich machen und sie in ihren sozialen Interessen bestärken, das ist richtig, aber ich glaube, das geht am Kern der Herausforderung vorbei. Und deswegen ist es auch nicht banal, darüber zu reden, was Lafontaine 1993 gemacht hat. Da hat Lafontaine nämlich dem Asylkompromiss mit zugestimmt, also ein Nachgeben gegenüber einer sozusagen rechten Entwicklung, die meines Erachtens eine falsche Antwort ist auf den Aufstieg der Rechten, mit einer Verschärfung von Gesetzen gegen Geflüchtete, Verschärfung des Asylrechts zu reagieren. Das sind dieselben Argumente, die jetzt im Kontext der Gründung von Aufstehen wieder gespielt wurden von mehreren Leuten, auch von Oskar Lafontaine. Und als Linke widerspreche ich da ganz deutlich, weil ich glaube, dass wir die Rechte dann nur geschlagen bekommen, wenn wir einerseits den Kampf gegen Rassismus und den Kampf für soziale Gerechtigkeit miteinander verbinden. Und wir müssen konstatieren, dass in Deutschland in den letzten Jahren es einen massiven Wachstum von Rassismus gegeben hat. Da haben verschiedene Leute eine wichtige Rolle gespielt. Da hat Thilo Sarrazin mit seinem Buch Deutschland schafft sich ab eine Rolle gespielt. Wir haben einen massiven Anstieg sowohl von antimuslimischem Rassismus als auch Antiziganismus. Wir haben einen latenten Antisemitismus in diesem Land. Und das heißt, wenn wir in dem Bemühen, die Rechte zurückzudrängen, schweigen zum Thema Rassismus, und das ist nicht das, was du machst, aber das, was du sagst, aber ich sehe in den Papieren, in den Veröffentlichungen von Aufstehen, wird dieses Thema ausgespart. Man positioniert sich einmal, kostet auch nicht viel, gegen Rassismus und Nationalismus, aber man geht die Herausforderung nicht an, tatsächlich deutlich zu machen, dass wir die Spaltungsideologie bekämpfen müssen. Dann werden wir nicht gewinnen. Und ich glaube, dann werden wir die AfD nicht zurückdrängen und dann werden wir die Leute auch nicht gewinnen. Dass die AfD jetzt teilweise in Umfragen wieder schwächer wird, liegt auch daran, dass es die starke Bewegung gegen rechts gibt. Das liegt daran, dass wir zum Beispiel in Städten wie in Chemnitz organisiert uns Nazis entgegengestellt haben. Und ja, es ist wichtig, sozusagen nicht den Nachbarn, der rassistische Ideen im Kopf hat, zu konfrontieren und sozusagen den Rassismusvorwurf um den Kopf zu werfen. Aber es ist wichtig, Nazis entgegenzutreten, weil ich glaube, das ist der einzige Weg, dass wir sie zurückdrängen. Weil ihre Strategie ist, auch über die Straße, über das Einrichten von Bürgerzentren, wie wir das in vielen in ostdeutschen Städten erleben, tatsächlich Raum zu greifen, die Straße zu wählen und das Klima in der Gesellschaft zu verändern. Ich habe in Offenbach, wo mein Wahlkreis ist, gibt es eine Tafel. Es gab eine Debatte über die Tafel in Essen, weil es dort den Leiter der Tafel gab, der die Leute nach deutscher oder nicht deutscher Herkunft sozusagen sortieren wollte. In Offenbach an der Tafel sagen die Leute ganz klar, und ich meine, das sind Menschen, die alle nichts haben, selbst von Hartz IV leben und solidarisch sind, dass es Leute schämen sollte, die hier verantwortlich sind für diese neoliberale Politik. Dort wird ganz klar gesagt, wir unterscheiden die Leute nicht nach ihrer Herkunft. Hier kriegt jeder was. Wir haben andere Mechanismen, um vielleicht auch mit Konflikten umzugehen. Und ich finde, es ist so wichtig, dass eine Bewegung, die den Anspruch hat, für soziale Gerechtigkeit zu sorgen und die Leute die Leute zu stärken, anzugehen gegen die Ungerechtigkeiten, dass diese tatsächlich sich auch als Teil der Bewegung gegen Rassismus, als Teil von Unteilbar, als Teil der vielen, vielen Mobilisierungen gegen Rechts versteht. Und da gibt es von Aufstehen meines Erachtens keine klaren Signale, beziehungsweise eher Signale in die falsche Richtung. Also, ich glaube, dass die Themen, an denen wir hier in Deutschland in dieser Situation Kämpfe führen müssen, die vielen sozialen Kampagnen sind, wo die neoliberale Politik durchschlägt in den Alltag, wie beispielsweise bei der Deutschen Wohnen, wie in den Krankenhäusern. Wir haben wichtige Debatte auch in den Gewerkschaften. Wir haben gerade von der Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung die, ich glaube, 4. oder 5. Konferenz Erneuerung durch Streik gehabt, weil es eine wichtige Entwicklung ist, auch in den Gewerkschaften den Einfluss der sozialdemokratischen Idee der Sozialpartnerschaft zurückzudrängen und zu kämpferischen Gewerkschaften zu kommen. Ich glaube, dass wir Einheitsfronten bilden müssen und selbstverständlich in diesen Bereichen zusammenarbeiten müssen, auch mit denjenigen Sozialdemokraten oder auch Grünen, die in anderen Punkten überhaupt nicht mit uns einig sind. Und ich glaube, dass die aktuelle Debatte in der SPD, wo es zumindest ein verbales Abrücken von der Agenda 2010 gibt, eigentlich eine Herausforderung ist, wo man gemeinsam sagen muss, dann lasst uns aber auch gemeinsam kämpfen, mit Gewerkschaften, mit Sozialverbänden, um diese Forderung umzusetzen. Und ich glaube, wir müssen gemeinsam kämpfen, und das wäre meine Erwartung auch an euch, dass wir gemeinsam aufstehen gegen Rassismus, dass wir uns den Nazis entgegenstellen, dass wir aktiv Rassismus zurückweisen. Und ihr seid eingeladen, euch auch im Rahmen der Linken, aber auch in den gemeinsamen Bewegungen daran zu beteiligen. Wie gesagt, die Linke hat das Selbstverständnis einer aktivistischen Mitgliederpartei. Es ist nicht überall perfekt. Ich glaube, wir müssen auch in der Linken viel ehrlicher eine Diskussion darüber führen, wie wir unsere Strukturen zum Werkzeug machen können, um soziale Kämpfe und soziale Bewegungen stark zu machen. Ich glaube, die Orientierung auf die politische Macht und auf die Regierungsbeteiligung ist der falsche Ratgeber für diese Entwicklung. Unser Ziel ist es, Menschen zu aktivieren, weil sie letztendlich diejenigen sind, die die Kräfteverhältnisse in der Gesellschaft zu verändern können. Ich freue mich, wenn wir an verschiedenen Punkten da gemeinsame Schritte gehen können, aber ich glaube, dass die Gründung von Aufstehen, selbst wenn man meint, man könnte damit gewisse Prozesse, die in anderen Ländern stattfinden, auf Deutschland übertragen können, einen Schritt in die falsche Richtung sind, weil es letztendlich ein Momentum, momentan wirkt Aufstehen als ein Momentum, also Momentum war eine Bewegung oder ist eine Bewegung, die versucht, die Labour Party nach links zu bewegen. Momentan sehen wir, dass Aufstehen eigentlich keine Wirkung in die Sozialdemokratie und in die Grünen hinein hat. Was die Wirkung ist, die wir momentan sehen, dass es Debatten gibt von rechts in die Linke rein. Dagegen wehren wir uns als Linke und führen Debatten, wie auch am letzten Wochenende, über unsere Position in der Migrationspolitik und unser Selbstverständnis als Partei, die gegen Neoliberalismus und Rassismus gleichermaßen kämpft. Und wir glauben, dass es die falsche Antwort ist, und trotzdem freuen wir uns natürlich an jedem Punkt, wo wir gemeinsam Kämpfe führen können, und davon gibt es, denke ich, mehr als genug.
Okay, now it's your turn to make contributions and ask questions. A couple of things. Try not to speak longer than 2 to 3 minutes. If you start playing on, we'll shut you up. Use within language, within reason, whichever language you want. So we're contributing in German or English. And the speaker will come at the end. We want to get some sort of flow in the debate. So if you want to say something, put your hand up and we'll call you.
And also, yes, if you don't want to be recorded, can you please indicate that, and yeah, you will be recorded.
There's a big microphone there at the back that you can use. Okay, first and second, if you use that microphone, then everyone can hear you.
Well, thanks very much for the presentation, all of you. My question goes to you, Steve. I would like to refer about the topic as you mentioned as secondary in your presentation, namely the immigration issue. What's the plan of Aufstehen to got the the support of immigrant movements after all the positions that persons like Wagner, for example, has put on the agenda? I'm saying this because I don't know, me as an immigrant at least, I don't feel like quite comfortable to work with an organization that has proposed a position as Wagner, for example, that has proposed a position like the one of Wagner, for example. I don't know how yeah, that's maybe the idea, because yeah, only just to remind you, maybe you're talking about like maybe the majorities of the country, like the deep Germany, who's like in the hinterland, for example, but the immigrant percentage in this country is also quite big. And if we only concentrate on the majorities, like, well, what happened, for example, with other minorities, for example? What happened if the day of tomorrow someone from Aufstehen starts saying, yeah, but you know, maybe the LGBT rights are not that important, we should focus on other issues? So, I mean, for me, that's quite really conflicting, to be honest. So, yeah, that's my question.
If the speakers are okay with it, they'll write down things and come back. Maybe in the middle of them. There's a speaker here and then someone here.
Yes, I try to do it in English. I'm Elif. I'm also part of the Linke and on board here in Berlin. And I have also like the same question like the person before, because my background is Turkish and I don't know anyone in Turkish community, and my friends and families, they feel that they Aufstehen is like talking to them or something. And also, I have to say that it's also because you say that you don't have these positions, but also before Aufstehen was built already, it started with the big faces of Sarah Wagenknecht and Oskar Lafontaine and other people who was doing every 2 weeks critics against migration, and also in the context of Aufstehen, and also against minority politics like gender politics or other minority politics. And I felt as part of the Linke that is more like also Christina said, to make pressure on our positions to open borders. That's our position still. So that was my feeling. And also like one of the big aims is like gaining back the AfD voters. For sure, we also want to gain them back, but not with telling them criticisms against migrations. And also there was a study from Eine, they said there is like 1% to get back from AfD. So there's not like a big capacity. Maybe it's more for Aufstehen, but I don't know if it's meant very much more. And also, like Christina said, my question is why Aufstehen didn't get in dialogue with all the social movements we have all over Germany. I'm since like almost 2 years in part of the Linke, but I was also always in extra-parliamentary left movements, like independent movements and anti-racist movements. There are a lot of movements, and I'm also now part of the movement Untitled or of the Alliance. And I don't know why Aufstehen, if it's really a serious issue to be a social movement, why they didn't talk with all these different movements, or also with syndicates before building and pronouncing a movement. I think it's not really working if 80 persons who are some famous names are telling, okay, we are now a social movement, and then it works. As long as I'm like since more than 20 years in social movements active, and I never saw that this could work in Germany at least. And if one of the gains was to get also social democrats, ex-social democrats voters back, then I think like Oskar Lafontaine or Sarah Wagenknecht is also not the really right person, because we're not really like bringing people together, not in social democrat party, but also not in left party. It's more that there we have a big fight because a lot of issues. So if you want to win a lot of people, maybe you should select some other persons that are not so so strittig, I don't know.
Controversial.
So I think there are a lot of movements we can support, like Untitled and also other movements, as I said, and I don't really understand why you don't support them, make something extra which is not really working. So that's my question.
Okay. There's someone here and someone at the back. We'll take a few more and then the speakers can answer questions.
First I'd like to say something about what's been said about what's wrong with left and why it failed. I don't think, I think that it's not a good choice to follow right on this field because racism is not something that is diffused in our society because people don't want migrants, but because media since 20 years are speaking every day, all day, only about this. And so, and also the statistics say that where there are more votes for AfD, for example, there are less presence of migrants. So this austerity is something that is built and follow on this field, it would be wrong. I think I am from Italian movement whose name is Potere al Popolo, that means power to the people, and is part of France Insoumise and Podemos alliance. And we think, for example, that what may fail is, for example, the fact that workers don't trust anymore trade unions, because trade unions are substantially bureaucracy, and people that don't live off this and not for this, as the comrade said. And for example, to reform how the trade union works in a more direct and more representative and also more conflictual way could be helped instead of taking words from the right side. Or another point could be to change our activism and be, for example, if you want to fight poor, and if you want, not poor, if you want to fight the presence of people, the fact that people live in the street, we can actually do that. We can help them, like occupying empty spaces or giving some motoristic things. It's not needed to go in the parliament for that. We can do that, like going in the street, like the Gilets Jaunes did. And something that is courage, like why people vote right, because if someone is from the right and don't want migrants, right politicians say kick them out. Why we don't start to say something radical like this? Example about we talk a lot about Mietvereinzing and Gentrifizierung of Berlin, but we never speak about, for example, confiscate and convert volumes of concrete that goes for tourism and that goes about commercial center. That maybe could maybe the left side be more appreciated between the people. I go to the first, and I will go to the first question. That is, if the racism is not the news about Aufstehen, I would like to know what is the news, because I only in the program of Linke and the Aufstehen, the only difference I found it was about liberty of circulation, and that is very dangerous, as the comrades who already said. And so, I make a confusion here. I would like to talk about the matter of racism, because the attacks, it's not just from Sarah Wagenknecht, it's not just gossip, it's the position about of Aufstehen is we have to defend welfare because it's under attack of too many migrants. That is quite very similar to AfD. But why don't we talk about welfare? So if the problem is defending welfare, why don't we talk about it? because it's 20 years that the welfare is under attack, and it's becoming always more bureaucracy, always more authoritarian, always more something that is kind of charity to the poor, that they continue working, staying poor. So it's kind of, why don't we talk about redistribution of richness? Because the taxes for the profits are always less, even in Germany. And so the workers have to sustain all the welfare. So the question is, why put in the center the borders instead of reforming the welfare, if it's the welfare the problem? You say because we have to follow also the contradiction of this movement. Yes, but this is a movement that comes from the bottom, and it clearly got some contradictions. If a movement that comes from the top, as Austen has this big contradiction, imagine try to do a creative imagination example. If there is a mass conflict, a mass movement like this in Germany, that is now very far away of possibilities, but if it happens, and not someone like La France Insoumise that have no problems about border issues, but someone with big contradiction try to manage it, it would be an help for revolution, or maybe an help for the right side.
There's someone at the back, someone here, and then I'll give the speakers time to respond to the first lot of questions.
Ja, mein Name ist Frank Renk, ich bin hier von der Linken aus Köpenick. Ich habe eine Frage an Jerome und eine Bemerkung. Ich weiß nicht, Jerome, verstehst du Deutsch? Okay. Alles klar. Mich würde mal interessieren, das ist eine sehr beeindruckende Bewegung, die Gelbwesten, wie eigentlich die politischen Organisationen, insbesondere vom Mélenchon La France Insoumise, wie sie darauf reagieren und wie sie intervenieren. Denn was man an der Bewegung sehen kann, ist ja, das ist ja nun offensichtlich etwas, was niemand von oben initiiert hat. Es ist sozusagen die sozialen Widersprüche, die explodiert sind. Und dann ist die Frage, wie gehst du da eigentlich rein? Wir stehen ja vor demselben Problem in Deutschland. Wir haben hier am Freitag 12.000 Leute auf der Straße gehabt in dem Verdi-Streik. Wir haben einen sehr erfolgreichen Klassenkampf gehabt in den Flughäfen, wo wir, ich weiß nicht, also Lohnerhöhungen, also eine Lohnangleichung gehabt haben, Ost-West endlich. Wir haben 15 bis 18% zum Teil rausgeholt für einige. Die Frage ist, wie schaffen es die Linke und andere Organisationen dort rein zu intervenieren? Ich sehe im Moment, sehe ich das erstmal so nicht. Wir haben das Problem, dass wir viele Kämpfe in Deutschland haben, aber kaum eines prägen. Mit einer entscheidenden Ausnahme, und das ist der Kampf gegen Rassismus und gegen die Nazis und die AfD im letzten Sommer. Das muss man erst mal sehen. Also jeder, der hier im Raum war und der bei Untitled da war, bei 242.000 durchgezählten Leuten, das war eine Erfahrung. Das letzte Mal, dass ich das so erlebt habe, war im Januar 2001. Damals. Also das ist eine reale Massenbewegung. Und es ist einfach unglaublich, dass Sarah Wagenknecht 3 Tage vorher sagt, damit wir Aufstehen werden dort nicht hingehen. Ich habe übrigens das erste Mal Leute von Aufstehen getroffen auf der Demonstration, die sind angekommen und haben gesagt, weil ich habe Flugblätter verteilt für Aufstehen gegen Rassismus. Das ist ja das Bündnis gegen die AfD, das Original sozusagen im Namen seit 2016, und die gesagt haben, oh, seid ihr das auch? Ich sage, nee, also mit der Wagenknecht haben wir nichts zu tun. Sich total darüber aufgeregt haben, dass die Sarah dazu nicht aufgerufen hat. Also man hat sofort die Spaltung gesehen. Ich glaube, wir dürfen uns nicht in die Tasche lügen, das Gefühl, das Steve hier heute rübergegeben hat, dass der Kampf für eine Einheit auf der Straße wird 0,0 durch diese Bewegung Aufstehen, also ist ja gar keine Bewegung, durch das Projekt in irgendeiner Weise reflektiert. Also es steht die Frage, jetzt komme ich zu meiner abschließenden Anmerkung, wie kommen wir denn dahin? Ich bin für Einheit im Kampf. Und es ist total auffällig, dass 2 führende Abgeordnete, auch aus meiner Partei, also sich wirklich mit Schande bekleckert haben, als wir Aufstehen gegen Rassismus im März 2016 gegründet haben. Da haben 19.000 Leute unterschrieben. Der Zentralrat der Muslime, jüdische Gemeinde, Zirske von Verdi, SPD der Abgeordnete, Linke. 19.000 Aufstehen gegen Rassismus, gegen die AfD, dass man dagegen was tun muss. 2 Tage vor der entscheidenden Pressekonferenz mit Petra Pau und anderen sind 2 von unseren Abgeordneten, machen in der jungen Welt einen frontalen Angriff gegen die Gründung dieses Bündnisses mit der Begründung, ihr macht gemeinsam mit dieser SPD gegen mich. Dieselben Leute sind jetzt im Wesen Aufstehen von Sarah dabei, ein Regierungsprogramm mit zu unterstützen, wo sie genau gemeinsam mit der Sozialdemokratie machen, aber nicht im Kampf gegen die AfD, sondern in irgendeiner entfernten Perspektive mal ein Regierung zu haben. Die SPD ist ja von 16 Jahren 12 Jahre in der Regierung. Das ist nicht Corbyn, das ist die Hartz-IV-SPD. Das ist, wir haben Kevin Kühnert gehabt letzten Januar, der einen Aufstand in der SPD gemacht hat und volle Unterstützung so kriegen sollte, durch jeden Linken, 100%. Ja, aber der hat sich durchgesetzt. Es ist diese SPD, der Gabriels, der Schröders und der, wie heißt diese Frau hier noch, Andrea so und so. Ja, also deswegen 100% bin ich bei Steve und auch bei Jerome, bei Christina sowieso. Wir brauchen eine gemeinsame Linke, die größer ist als die Linke. Aber wir brauchen eine Linke, die kämpft gegen die Rechten. Die kämpft. Was sollen wir den Leuten in Chemnitz sagen? Wir haben in Chemnitz Aufstehen gegen Rassismus, hat die Nazis gestoppt. Da gibt es jetzt diese Kohlmann-Truppe, die das alles gemacht hat, dieses Pogrom vor einem halben Jahr. Die haben ein Zentrum jetzt aufgebaut, da gibt es eine Anwohnerinitiative, da sind 110 Leute persönlich gekommen, Anwohner, die gesagt haben, haut ab hier, ihr scheiß Nazis. Und wir müssen diese Leute erreichen und mit einer Bewegung, weißt du, ganz ehrlich, wenn du mal guckst, wann hat Sarah das Wort Rassismus jemals im Mund genommen? Ich habe gesucht, ich warte darauf. Die nimmt das Wort Rassismus nicht im Mund. Man kann den Rassismus nicht bekämpfen, wenn man es nicht mal benennt. Wir müssen gemeinsam dort, wo die AfD auftaucht, gemeinsam kämpfen. Egal wo wir stehen, links von der Mitte. Also Einheit in der Aktion, das zählt.
Guten Abend zusammen, mein Name ist Sebastian, ich bin Wähler bei der Linken Partei Aufstehen. Mein Eindruck ist, dass die meisten Redebeiträge sich jetzt und auch die dritte Rednerin an einen Zweitredner, ich habe den Namen nicht gemerkt, an Zweitredner abarbeiten und an Aufstehen, das Aufstehen sich zu wenig gegen Rassismus positioniert. Und ich habe den Eindruck, dass der zweite Redebeitrag im Prinzip darauf wiederum schon die Antwort gegeben hat, dass es darum einfach mal gerade nicht geht, sondern dass man jetzt an dem Punkt ist, dass man unabhängig von diesen ganzen Sachen mal zusammenfindet und rausgeht und andere Leute überzeugt und damit auch mal Leute erreicht, die nicht schon die gleiche Meinung haben. Weil ich glaube, wir alle im Raum sind gegen Rassismus, wir sind gegen gegen Sexismus und so weiter. Und das ist völlig klar, aber die Leute, die vielleicht nicht gerade hier drin sitzen, das sind diejenigen, die man vielleicht erreichen muss. Und das ist meine konkrete Frage an die dritte Rednerin. Wie tritt man an die Leute ran, die nicht schon im eigenen Boot sitzen, wenn man jedes Mal dann gleichzeitig immer wieder sagt, Moment, wir müssen uns erstmal klar positionieren gegen Rassismus, gegen Sexismus, gegen so. Und dann sind wir wieder in diesen Grabenkämpfen, die der zweite Redebeitrag vorhin schon angesprochen hat.
Okay, so now we've had a few questions of all the speakers. I think most of them are new to speak, so maybe you could go.
Did you want to say something about meetings first before we go on?
No, I think we've got time for the second round of questions, but just so that there's not 20 questions each, but that's at the end.
So, I'm not a professional. I've not got very good handwriting, so I'll try to answer the questions. And I think a lot of them overlap quite a lot. But if I don't, and you feel that I haven't answered, so just stand up and shout at me and I'll take it like a man. Right, so maybe to talk a bit more generally, very generally, the left has always consisted of the students, or the people who used to be students, and that's where I come from. I'm a, bourgeois educated, lefty, typical, yeah? And the workers. And we need to get, and if we're going to win, we've got to have the workers and the students, yeah? And it's about winning, and that all I can beg is please always keep in mind this is about winning. And this is the thing that I'm still missing. I get a lot of criticism, Zara Vangenesh. I'm not in the same party as her. I'm not a fan of the SPD. I am completely aware it's hard to be SPD. I'm trying to overthrow the current leadership in order to create the political space that the SPD can go into a coalition with the Linke. But what we need is, we know what happened with Red-Green. Yeah? The great hope of Red-Green betrayed its hope entirely. The Greens sent troops into illegal wars using German tax money to bomb civilians in Yugoslavia, and the SPD betrayed the working class and at the same time gave massive tax cuts to wealthy with Agenda 2010. Yeah? So we know Red-Green isn't enough. Now, I'm absolutely for bringing in the Linke. They don't take corporate donations. Of course, they have, from my point of view, a much clearer political course that I completely support. What the Linke don't have is a perspective of power on a national level. Yeah, so it's, I think, with the Montagsdemonstrationen back in the 2000s against the agenda, I think that the Linke, there was a lot of it, really was a social movement. At the moment, I may be wrong, and I'd be delighted if the Linke wins a social majority and provides the next Chancellor of Germany. Go for it. I'm in. And the reason I'm in the SPD is the SPD, at least until recently, had at least the perspective of power. We're going to be we want to provide the Chancellor. We want to run this government. Because that, it's all parliamentarism, whatever, but that is a huge tool. You can change stuff there. The Linke does not have this perspective. And as such, it remains a sort of a small, sort of exotic thing in the mix, which might go in as a sort of bit of spice in the coalition. But the trouble is that red, red, green is not enough, because you've got red, red, green and lobbyists. And then what we need is power from below of people. And it's not just left-wing activists. We need huge, broad social support. Now, going back to my mother-in-law, she used to come to me and say, I just saw that Gizzy on TV. I think he's very good. I was like, oh, would you vote for the Linke? Oh, no. And now she sees Wagenknecht. I just saw that Wagenknecht on TV. I think she's very good. Would you vote for them? No. And so I want to ask you, so I asked her, why don't you like the Linke? Oh, nee. Links, das sind alle arrogante Leute. Sie sind so hochnäsig und die sind immer besserwisserisch. Is it alright if I do this in church? Die sind immer, und die schreien, die sind immer kritisch, die sind immer gegen, sie sind niemals konstruktiv. Sorry, there's a whole lot of people out there in Germany who think you are horrible people. And me as well. Yeah, I'm a Linke as well. Yeah, so, yeah, we got to deal with this. We need a social majority. And the trouble is, a lot of the anti-racist discourse, I believe in LGBT, in migrant rights. You may have noticed I'm a migrant too, yeah? This is the basis of our struggle, because we will not win if we let the working class be split. We have to all stand together. Divide and rule has always been the tactic of the ruling class. However, it's become something like a badge of identity. And it's become, let's say, of the student left, yeah? It's become this thing of, well, of course we're never going to win. Of course, yeah, society's shit, but I'm against racism. It becomes like virtue signaling, yeah? And so I go and shout at people for being racist. Often when they didn't, what they said was often not very clever, and is often bordering on racist. There's this thing like in England, I'm not racist, but, and then they say something. And it's kind of like those Christmas dinner conversations with the embarrassing members of your family, yeah? Now, if you're 14, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, and Christmas does not go well, yeah? All I'm saying is, can we get beyond 14? And there are techniques with this active counting. And the first thing is you have to learn to listen to people. And if you dig deeper, say, all right, you're worried about the refugee home that's being built here, yeah? What are you worried about? And people are worried about all sorts of things. They're worried about jobs and schools and housing. They're worried about security and crime. But are they actually just they hate people who have a different skin colour? Or are these actually fundamentally economic worries? Yeah? That they don't have enough security on the streets. They don't get apartments, and this is the thing, because actually just, a tiny hike in the birth rate, there would also be a shortage of housing. It's not migrants' fault, yeah? And if you go to the Flüchtlingsheim and try and take all the money there, there is no money there. The money is in the tax havens. But you have to steer that conversation, and you have to let people speak. And my concern with some of the anti-racist or the sort of diversity politics or identity politics, it's become this virtue signalling. Right? When I was in the Cub Scouts, when I was a kid, you got all the badges, yeah? And it becomes, I've got a badge, yeah? And it becomes aggressive. Now, there are good reasons for that. If Nazis, the people who want to inflict physical violence and intimidate migrants march down the street, we have to stop them. And I'd be very proud to be immediately there. But at the same time, we have to look at the people who the Nazis are speaking to. And if we just go, you're all Nazis as well, if we say that every AfD voter is a Nazi, we are driving them into the hands of Björn Höcke. That's a problem, yeah? So it's a practical question, and if we can leave the moralising aside, how are we going to do this? And I just don't think the 14-year-old reaction is just very clever. Yeah, it's not going to work. I want to win. We can win. I'm all up for, solidarity. The trouble is, you know, not having been involved in the Linke, because I think like 80% of the criticisms are coming, criticisms of individual things of Sarah Wagenknecht, and I think within the Linke, Aufstehen is seen as a projection of Sarah Wagenknecht. 80% of the people in the Aufstehen who signed up are not in any political party. That's 160,000 people, yeah? That's way more than members of the Linke. They are there. You know, so I'm not going to, you know, you can criticise all you like, and there's a lot of things Aufstehen hasn't got together, yeah? And a party or a trade union, it's got loads of money, it's got loads of resources. Aufstehen hasn't got any single sort of permanent employee. Well, sorry? Okay, sorry. Well, they've got jobs, yeah. But I'm sorry, we're not all unemployed. But Sarah Wagenknecht, you know, she's the Fraktionsvorsitzende of the Linke, and frankly, she's got stuff to do. You know, I think it's quite a busy job. You've got to go to the Bundestag or whatever. You know, the movement is the root. So all I say is, you know what? Go along to a meeting and meet the people. You'll find there's people from much other different sectors of society who are simply not concerned with all this inner party Linke stuff. There are a few people from the Linke, and to be honest, well, yeah, but if they're just sort of doing some party thing for Sarah Wagenknecht, most people just like, well, what's that about? They want to get going and do stuff. Now, could we be better organised? Could we have got more stuff going? Absolutely. I'm working full out on this, and I'm frankly exhausted. Right? Should we be doing more alliances with people? Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, I was there a long time ago too. It's fantastic. But it was essentially top down. But it's difficult when you found a movement, and then it feels like there's thousands of people online from the Linke who've got nothing better to do all day than read every single word that Sarah Wagenknecht is. Get a hobby, mate. If you're reading every single word, so looking for the word, if you're doing word searches for racism in all of Sarah Wagenknecht's speeches, I haven't done that. And frankly, it's, you know, I hope you've got some sense of why I'm here. That's not why I'm doing this. You know, I've really got better things to do. I think we've all got better things to do. Yeah. So it becomes this sort of inner party strife, which makes sense if you're just defensive and you don't believe you can win. We can win. But there is objections.
There's going to be chance for another round of questions.
What's new about
okay. What's new? Well, it's all these people. It's all these people who are not in parties, they're pissed off, but they see parties as they are, and they don't feel represented. They see structures and bureaucracies and a rather intellectual culture or a denunciatory culture when it comes to identity politics, and they feel uncomfortable. Now, at the same time, go to an Aufstehen meeting, I have never heard one word of homophobia, of racism, or of anything like that. Yeah? There are Turkish people in Aufstehen in Cologne. I don't know what's going on in Berlin. But, you know, go out and check it out. All I can see, you go once. If you don't like it, you don't have to go again. It's all right. But before it's become like this sort of article of faith. This sort of terrible sort of racist thing. Or it's just like, honestly, people are talking about Hartz IV, they're talking about Vermögenssteuer, they're talking about solidarity of unten gegen oben, yeah, of below against above. They're not. It's just not talking about these things. And these are the things that people react to, and I think we can win with. Now, it's only going to be one small part of the jigsaw to create the social change we need, but if you're just saying, we've got to stamp on that immediately, I don't know if we're really going to get anywhere. Because at the moment, the German left has not been getting anywhere. Yeah? The social movement that the Linke should be, which I would, you know, it is also, is probably pretty strong in Berlin, which is great, but that's 3 million people in a country of 80. And Hamburg, yeah, okay, but the big cities. You've got that sort of large metropolitan, cosmopolitan thing, yeah? We've got the same thing in Britain with Brexit, yeah? You've got huge swathes of people who've been made unemployed by Thatcher when she shut down all the heavy industry. You tell them to take back control, they want to take back control. And there's a bunch of, you know, students or whatever in big cities telling them they're all racist because they voted for Brexit. They voted for democracy, they voted to have a say in their own community. And there's different projections onto that. But if we start by, if Labour starts by saying all those people who voted for Brexit are just racist and stupid working class people who do not deserve democracy, then Labour does not deserve to be elected in the next government.
Christina? So Christina and Jerome also get the chance to say something, and then you can
Well, I try to answer in English, but I'm looking for some words. For example, I'm looking for the word Pappkamerad. Can you just say it for me? Straw person. Because, yes, of course, Steve, no one tells wants to shout at people and telling them that they are racist. So this is absolutely clear, of course. So this is why I think it is so important to fight side by side with people, to really get involved into movements, to be in contact. And I think this is the way how you fight racism, is being involved with people and getting organized. Sorry, so the left is not perfect, but we are doing it all over the countries, not only in the major cities, but also for example, in Hesse, in Bavaria and elsewhere. And we try in our strategy, and I think this is so important. There are no shortcuts. So I'm a bit irritated. If you talk about the perspective of power, and we talk about the next general elections being in M21, do you think seriously that there's an option of power for a left-wing politics which rejects NATO, which says no to foreign intervention, in which is really challenges neoliberal politics? Sorry, I think we seriously have to talk about the race of counterpower, to set pressure on any government we will have in the future time, and to encourage people to fight their fights where they live, where they are, and to create a political force that is able to articulate these demands. And so we try to fight side by side, and I think it's very encouraging to see in those fights that are going on. So we see interesting developments. For example, the Ryanair strikers, you mentioned, they were marching on the Untitled demonstration with their own blog. And so this is a way, a huge step forward, because in the trade union debate, in the working class debate, we have an argument about the rise of the right and the necessity of building a solidaric and anti-racist answer. Look at what happens in the hospitals, where Die Linke has been involved by, with people working in hospitals, but also supporters to create a strong movement for more having more staff in the hospitals. We have many of these, mainly women, being involved and also being turning to the left. We have a rise of membership of people working in hospitals because Die Linke has been deeply involved into these real fights. And I think it's so important to have the understanding that you can't stand beside real movements. You can't just create a campaign to get someone in power, but you really have to dig and have to build this from the scratch. And my argument is not putting on a badge against and shouting on and denouncing people as being racist. So what we are doing, for example, supporting the campaign Aufstehen gegen Rassismus mentioned, is to have trainings for people, and they were mainly asked for in the trade unions. How do I manage to stand up to racism if my colleague gets racist? I just had a meeting in Chemnitz with school students and having Nazi pupils in their class, and they're standing up and talking about racism, getting no support by the teachers. How do you encourage these people? I think you have to be there, and you have to be politically absolutely clear. Maybe this is answering the question of you. I think we have to, this is what we are trying to do all the time. This is our everyday life, to go out to talk to people, to get involved, to get organized, to identify which are the movements we want to bring forward. For example, if, in Berlin, of course, the fight against Deutsche Wohnen enteignen, so to expropriate Deutsche Wohnen is a very important movement. We have movement, and this is quite radical, I think, the slogan, as you ask for more radical talk. And it is so important to get the different initiatives that are fighting against the desperate situation in housing, to get them together. But you have to be part and parcel of these fights and movements. And for example, to support the school students in coping with a really difficult situation, for example, in these schools in Chemnitz, where they see that the right wing is getting more and more space. This has nothing to do to shouting at people, but it has to do of connecting the fights for social rights with the fight against racism, and this is not automatic. And I think racism is there's no automatic mechanism that brings people who are poor to racism. So of course there's a fertile soil for racists they can exploit if you have poverty and if you have the politics of neoliberalism. But racism has its own logic, and you can't understand the current situation without the constant trial of people like Sarrazin, the CDU, but also the CSU, of setting the agenda against asylum seekers and against Muslims. And so this is a fight that has to be connected, but you have to address it. And my criticism is that Aufstehen hides away, because there are different positions on this question. And there were many statements when Aufstehen was launched. And so I think you have to get this sorted out, because you will fail in creating a movement for social justice if you hide away as a movement as a whole, not as individual, but as a movement or as a campaign as a whole. Well, I think this was what I wanted to say. So please,
some questions that you.
Okay, I have a lot of things to say, unfortunately, about everything I heard before. I'm going to start about the Linke, I think, and Aufstehen. I think to be crow with the Linke. We cannot forget the fact that every society is different. It's very important. I mean, Great Britain is very liberal, France is very equalitarian, and Germany is authoritarian. It changed a lot in the last century. After the Nazis, I think it really changed. A lot of immigrants came to this country, and it really changed, I think, the society. We cannot export movement, like you said, from a country to another one. There are no red buttons where you can press Gilets Jaunes in Germany, and you need to look what happened in the world in the last century in the left movement to try to manage in which direction we should go. For example, if you look at the PTB in Belgium, it's this things on the wall. Since many years, they've been on social topic in the propaganda, and they are, I think, now the second most popular party in Belgium. The politics system as well is really important. In UK, we are almost in bi-party system, which is not the case of Germany. In US, you have bi-party system, so it's very hard to know what we should do. I think direct democracy is very important. I think it's one of the keys of the success is direct democracy for any left movement. About the freedom of inspiration, it is not our position in France Insoumise. It is not our position in France Insoumise. We are not for the freedom of inspiration. When happened October demonstration, in the week before in France, we had a kind of petition, it was a petition, about the immigration. And some member of the France Insoumise signed the petition. And the position of the France Insoumise was actually we should not sign this petition because this petition is not talking about the reason of the people why they're here. War, free trade agreement. And it's very important. When we're talking about freedom of association, we have to talk about this international organization who are organizing this mess. European Union is one of these organizations. World Trade Organization is one of these organizations. IMF is one of these organizations who is totally making the mess around the world. How do we get in the yellow movement for the France Insoumise? Well, it's not complicated. We are just here on the street since many, many years, so it's automatic we are here. At the beginning of the movement, there were a lot of problems because they were not recording the demonstration to the local administration. We helped them. We helped the yellow vest to get recorded. So yeah, we just here, just simple. When you have a huge movement like this, it's not so complicated to be inside. We're just always on the street when we have to be on the street. About the immigration. All the yellow vests are working about immigration. When you have over 10 million people voting for the Front National, it's very hard. And the simple solution is you don't talk about it. You just go to the next question. And the next question is much more interesting. That's why I think Aufstehen, when she talked about that, I think it was really a huge mistake. You should not talk about that. So the other problem then after is, of course, social justice and social democracy again. Direct democracy.
Okay, we now have a choice of how we go forward. We can either let the speakers make a couple of final statements and carry on the discussion in the local bar, or we can have another round of questions and contributions. What's the feeling of the room on this? We could stay here forever. Okay, let us have a.
So we're united.
Okay, then. If we're allowed to go, we can carry on talking towards you in the bar. We have.
I promise to make myself available for criticism.
Yeah.
I have to get up at about 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, though, so be gentle.
Let's put this. Is there someone who's really desperate to say something?
It looks like there's 2 or 3 people who want to say something. So.
There's one. Can the people who are really desperate to say something very, very quickly? Then we'll have some announcements. Then a couple of summing up words from the people, and then we'll try and be in the bar for 9:15. So put your hands up again. The people really have to say so. We have 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, just really quick, since you didn't barely address the strategies of our immigration from Aufstehen, I would make some quick remarks. You say you're immigrant, but you're first-class immigrant, you're European. Yeah, absolutely. You have absolutely social rights here, and you have absolutely political rights. You can vote, and you can access to social security. I worked, for example, 3 years for a public institution, and I cannot even have access to Hartz-IV. Hartz-IV is really shit, but doesn't have access to social security is like shit. And that's, my reality is really like nothing. There is reality for people here, like who has been living in Germany for more than 20 years, and their pensions are even like not like the half of Germans. And yeah, you said we have to go and talk with the people, but you didn't say nothing about going to talk about with immigrants. And,
right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. And the point is, the only issue you mentioned was like to have solidarity with immigrant movements. And if the strategy of Aufstehen is to have only solidarity and not to fight for the social rights, for the political rights of the immigrants movement, it's a completely forgotten movement. I completely oppose what you said before. Like, not to talk about immigration. What the hell is that? That cannot be a position, a political position of a party, of a movement. It's completely irresponsible. You have to have. Yeah, but it's no, but it's completely irresponsible. You have to have a position. You have to have a position that allows people living here as immigrants to have social rights and political rights.
I said this discussion will probably continue in the bar. These two, Elif and then...
No, it was also like you didn't answer that question. What is your connecting class politics? Or your strategy to include immigrants who are the most exploited people in capitalism? That was the question, also the same. And then you didn't answer also my other question. Why you didn't have any dialogue with real existing, not virtually existing, real existing social movements all over Germany before pronouncing a movement? Why didn't you talk with all these people who are on the streets? I don't understand that. If you want to be successful, if winning is the issue, I would talk to syndicates, to tenants, to also Unteilbar. We was built in last summer, we started. So why you never came to us? We have people from all over Germany, it's not just Berlin. Like just last weekend we had a big meeting, there came a lot of people from little villages in East Germany, and they asked for our help and let's do something there together, because they have elections there and big issues, also social issues, and Unteilbar was against racism but also for social justice. We had like Ryanair people, we had all these different people, syndicates, everybody was, it was like a part of connecting class politics. That's what I said, that was my question. And also like we speak every week with all these people, also with people who voted for AfD, and for sure I try to convince them. That's my job. I mean, that's our job, to convince all the people for freedom, for peace, for social justice, and against racism, I think. So nobody's saying they're all racist, so I don't understand why a lot of people always say this, because I mean, it's just a joke. I'm talking every week on the streets with so many different people. That's my job, I think.
Right, the last person from the floor.
Yeah, I'm Peter from the Left Party here in Pankow. When I listened to the speeches of Steve and Christine, and somewhat controversial issues, I had the idea that somehow your differences between you reflect in a way the different political systems in Great Britain and France on one side, and Germany on the other side. So in Great Britain, the majoritarian vote system, it means you have to win the majority of the electoral districts. It means you have to reach, you have to address 50% of the population or more. In Germany, you might get 20% of the votes, and as we have the presentation according to the total share of percentage, still you might join a progressive government and influence politics. But that's not what I wanted to say. I wanted to speak about the Christmas party dinners. Well, my parents live in the countryside in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, in an area where there are a lot of AfD voters. And we have a lot of talks with their friends, so they work in medical professions. So I meet there many people in the age of 75, 80, former nurses, medical doctors, and so on. And they support most of our political views of the political left. They support our views on health insurance, welfare, non-interventionist foreign politics, and so on, and taxes. Most of them would not support our views on immigration. They are definitely not racist and not nationalist. They would rather have some pragmatic and profound argument like, okay, if we have immigration, we need to control it, we need to regulate it. As many immigrants come from countries, for instance, where there are contagious diseases that we've already overcome. If they come into the country, we have to know who it is, where it comes from, he has to undergo medical treatment, maybe vaccination, medical check, and so on. So it means if you, as the left, demand open borders, this is naive and it's not very realistic. So now I could react in different ways. I could say this is almost racist, this is evil, and say that immigrants might bring in contagious diseases. Stop thinking like that. Or I might react in a different way, and in this respect I would like to support the point of view of Steve. I could say, okay, we have immigration, you can't stop it. Even if you demand stop immigration now, we will still have immigration the next day. So we have to handle the problem in a way. We need public housing sector. We need better schools. We need language courses and so on. And of course, we need more public funding for medical aid for immigrants. We need to take the money from somewhere. So we come back to our issues, to our left issues. I think most crucial issue is, anyways, distribution of wealth. Immigration is a secondary issue. And I think we should, if you talk to somebody whose political views are close to ours, accept the point of view on immigration. We should tell those people, okay, we have different attitudes towards immigration. We can discuss this, but still we are on the same side. And too often in the left party in Germany we talk differently. We talk like first you have to share our view on immigration. Otherwise we cannot be on the same side, and this is wrong, I think.
Okay, thanks everyone for the discussion. As said, we will carry on talking later. Before some final words from the speakers, there's a number of announcements. First, Carol is going to say what the Labour Berlin is doing next.
Okay, so next physical Labour Berlin meeting is on the 19th of March, and that will be in the back room of Aufstehen, which is a bar on Oranienburger Straße, and anyone is welcome. So yeah, please come along if you want to. So I think it starts at 7 o'clock, so that's on the 19th of March. Then tomorrow evening, sooner than that, there's an online meeting which is on the subject of the left and Brexit. And there's an MP, a British Labour MP. MEP, sorry, MEP. She's Jude Curtin-Darling, and she's talking, and also a couple of other people. I think, Steve, you have the names more than I, so do you have the names?
Yes, that's tomorrow. Anthony Barnett is he's one of the advisory panel of DiEM25 and the author of a book on Brexit and Trump called The Lure of Greatness. And there's George Hall, who is a political scientist who blogs for the full Brexit. So he's a clean break Brexiteer from the left as well. So come and watch the gladiator fights there.
So if you want to log on to that meeting, the Zoom number is on both Labour Germany on Facebook and on Berlin. Not yet, but I'll put it on.
It is.
Oh, it is now. Sorry, my comrade is telling me he's already done it, so that's fantastic. Yeah, so on Labour Berlin Facebook page, so you can find the Zoom link, and so all you have to do is, I think, upload Zoom as a program, and then log on, key in that number, and then join the meeting. So and that starts at 8:30 German time. Okay, thank you.
If anyone's unclear about any of that, you can talk to Carol and Steve in the pub and they'll tell you what you need to do. From the Linke Internationals, we meet on the 4th Monday of each month. From this year, we're starting meeting in the Roterladen in Friedrichshain. The next meeting, there are leaflets around. We have women from Poland and from Germany talking about the women's movement in those countries coming up to the International Women's Day. Take a leaflet. Our next meeting in German is going to be a month from today, the 19th of March, in this room, where we have Claudia Heidt, Elena Gagowska, and Sarah Maldini talking about the militarisation of the EU. Sarah is the Syrian refugee who was locked up in Greece for helping other refugees. So if you want to carry on this discussion, please come along. If you want to know more about it, you can leave your mail address. And because we're talking about doing things to activities which you can do, as said, the 8th of March is International Women's Day, Frauenkampftag. There's going to be firstly a public holiday for everyone, yay, and also a demonstration at Alexanderplatz. And on the 16th of March, it's the International Day Against Racism, where there are going to be worldwide demonstrations. The one in Berlin will be on Wittenbergplatz. I think it's at 2 p.m. There are leaflets at the back you can take. If all that's too much for you to take in, just leave your email address and we'll send you all the information later. Right, which of you wants to make the first final remarks? Or do you just want to go?
I think traditionally Christina goes first, but I'll be happy to go first, whatever you like.
Should we do this way?
Okay.
Last time we did this way.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to answer to you about saying that don't talk about immigration is not a good strategy. I'm a member of La France Insoumise, Die Linke, and Parti de Gauche. So our position on immigration is clear. I'm actually doing our program. Now I'm going to try to explain how they work, and maybe you're going to understand how, for me, it's very smart. If you start to talk about immigration, most of the people are going to leave because Gilets Jaunes are meeting in the roundabout, they are creating their own agora. If you start with immigration, most of the people are going to leave. Or they're going to start to talk about, oh, it's bad, or it's good, always about morality, If you forget about that, you're going to start about the real democracy, the constitution, which is very important in France to understand that we are watching right now the end of the Fifth Republic. The Fifth Republic is collapsing in front of our eyes in France. Then you go to the next topic, then someone is going to talk about maybe the franc CFA, which is a topic as well in Italy with Luigi Di Maio, I think. Yeah. Then people are going to understand why the people from Africa are going to France, because they don't have the power to create their own currency, which is as well the case of the country in the Eurozone. We don't have the power to create our own currency because it's in the hands of the European Bank. Then you write down your program of the Gilets Jaunes, let's get rid of the franc CFA. And then you created a reason why people are not going to come to France to get these shitty jobs, to work in a kitchen for nothing, and then be treated like a piece of crap, absolutely. So it's a reason why I think immigration, we can talk about it, but first let's talk about the social problem and the entire economic system and the international organization. I mean, IMF, European Bank, European Union, we have democracy inside this institution. I mean, we have the European election in a few months. 70% of the vote in the European Parliament are just for killing. There's no point to vote in this Parliament. So our weakness is inside our constitution and inside the law. If you start with a topic very tricky like immigration, it's bad. You need to go to the next steps. You were saying that it's very important to talk about houses, social health. Yes, you need to understand why those people from South Atmosphere are coming to us. There are some reasons. I mean, my friends who are coming from South Atmosphere are not very happy in Germany. I mean, some of my friends get a fit in his mouth a couple of years ago. I mean, when I ask them, they say, I would prefer to go back to my country, to live with my family. Well, let's create the condition for them to live in their own country. Because if they're not happy here, if we're living in a racist country, I mean, then let's talk about other things. Change the international institution. Let's change the free trade agreement. All of this.
We are part of this society since years. People without German citizenship since 20, 30 years. Like my parents, they don't have citizenship. They live here since 30, 40 years. Can you imagine? So why should they go to somewhere bad or live where they come from?
No, if they're born here, of course.
No, they're not born here. I just said they come 40 years ago. Like a lot of Turkish people, refugees, workers. I mean, we are part of this.
Then, do you have inside the program of the Linke the right of the soil? Do you want to change the right of the? Because in France, you have the right of the blood and you have the right of the soil. No? Is correct in English? Say that. It's inside the program of the Linke because for us it's not a question. It's in our constitution since many years. If you're born here, you're French. But if you're born in Germany, you're German.
No,
I think this is a question which we're not going to answer in a minute, but we can start to answer it in the bar afterwards. If Christine and Steve sub up, and then we can. Yeah.
Need a drink.
First, I wanted to start off with the Christmas dinner. Yeah, because I think it's important, of course, with your family and even with your colleagues or your schoolmates. Of course, you won't discuss every day the same agenda of racism and anti-racism. But what my expectation is, as a left winger and a left party member, is to encourage people not to silence racism at all. That doesn't mean that you have between the first between the first course and the second course to repeat your arguments. But of course, you have to be sure about your arguments. Germany is a country of migration, so every family anyway has a history of migration. I think it is we have to stop. You called migration as a problem. I think we have to talk about migration as a reality, and also, even in most cases, migration is not just nothing in capitalism is on free will, because people are forced to do certain things. But of course, they have the right to migrate, and I'm proud that Linke is a party that defends this right of freedom of movement. And I think we have to change our point of view. We have to see migrants, those who migrated to Germany 40 years ago, like the parents of Elif, but also like the Afghan and Syrian refugees that came here over the last years. We have to win them and see them as colleagues. They are our mates. We are fighting together for social and political rights. And if we don't change this point of view, and if we see them as something alien or something that doesn't belong to society or something that is a problem, then we have, I think, we have the wrong perspective. And of course, you won't solve the problem on the Christmas dinner table. This is why we are building movements. We are building anti-racist and anti-fascist movements because we want to change society. We don't want that a party, that Tino Sarrazin is holding speeches in universities. We and our comrades are going there protesting and show that we are not silencing racism. This doesn't convince any racism, but it encourages the anti-racist to stand up and speak up in the family, on the workplace, in the classroom. And I think this is a task we have as left party, but many people, we are working together in the anti-racist movement, and many also social democrats, we are having the same fight and argument, and I think it's very important. The second movement we are building are the social movements and social fights. And of course you have to look what is the social fight in the part where you're working at, in the city where you're living at. But so you mentioned different things you can do. You can win people to fight for, even though those who have strange ideas about migrations and others. Of course, if you have a campaign in Britz Süd against for not having bad conditions of housing and for higher rents, of course you work together with people with different ideas. But I think if you work together in these fights, you have to contest racist ideas and bring people to another perspective. I want to, and this is the same proposal I put forward to people who signed the call of Aufstehen, because Steve didn't talk about honest balance. of Aufstehen from the 4th of September when the campaign was launched, and now about the successes of building the movements. And so I would be glad if you come back to it. What is your balance after half a year? And I reflect that there's not so much movement outside, but I realized by the going down of the movement outside on the streets and so on, I see the impacts in the internal debate of Die Linke, and this is a debate that comes from the right and not from the left. And so I think it is so important, so the left is not perfect. And if we have something better at a certain time, I'm happy with this. But I'm really happy that we have a party in the parliaments, but also in the locality, which is clear against Hartz IV and against privatization, which defends the rights of asylum seekers and the rights of migrants, which stands against racism, which has a position on open borders and the freedom of movement, which is clear in the question of rejecting any militarization and war, and this means German militarism, but also the EU militarism we are facing at the moment. And I think it's very worthy to have a left party which is then possible, which is then able to build broader movements to actually challenge the balance of forces in this society and to create a counterpower to corporate power and the power of the right. And so I encourage everyone who is interested to fight together with Die Linke and to get to know Die Linke and to join Die Linke. And I'm encouraging every other person here of the Labour Party and who else let's unite in fight in the different campaigns that were mentioned, in fighting for the campaign Deutsche Wohnen Eignen, in fighting racism and fashion, building the International Day against Racism and Fascism, which is actually has demonstrations here in Berlin, but also in dozens of cities all over Europe. I think, we will continue the debate, but we should be united in the fight for social rights and against racism.
I'll try and do better at answering questions, and I will be there in the bar. So dialogue with social movements. My weekend, I was at Fridays for Future, live streaming that. Then I was at the strike conference from Rosa Luxemburg in Braunschweig, so there's loads of trade unionists all talking about organising and going out there. Then there was a Bunte Westen demo in Hannover, which was with the motto, wir sind viele, wir sind vielfältig und wir haben die Schnauze voll. And there were lots of guys, there were 3 homeless people who spoke there. It was open mic, not a single word of racism or anti-migrant sentiment. Anybody could walk up and speak. Then I talked with people in Paderborn, also with Gewerkschaften, with Aufstehen, but also Verdi and stuff like that. And I had sort of campaign meetings today talking about campaigns for sort of unbezahlbar, so for the respect for people who work in the public sector. So I want to talk to other movements. I'm doing it all the time. I think also people were there was an Unteilbar Bundestreffen or something on Sunday.
Yes.
And I think people from Aufstehen were there, and that was certainly, I was pushing very hard for that, and that's certainly, so that if they weren't there to talk to me, yes, okay, it's definitely, yeah.
Before pronouncing.
Sorry?
Anyway,
Yeah.
before pronouncing the movement, like before.
Well, yeah, I'll be honest, like every social movement is exactly the same with momentum. When these things are set up, it's chaos. You know, there's expectation that it's almost conspiracy theory. There's expectation that, well, they've got it all sorted out. It's bloody chaos. No one has a clue what they're doing. Yeah, and people are running around just trying to get these stuff because they've all got day jobs. We don't have a staff, and should it be better? Definitely. Should we have done more? Definitely. At the same time, there are all these people out there. All I can say is they're really into the gegeben. Yeah, they like that. They want to do that because they see it's a symbol that works. Here is a person. I don't agree with Jerome that movements can't cross borders. We saw, for instance, the anti-atomic power movement definitely crossed borders. The peace movement definitely crossed borders. The civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, inspired people all around the world, especially my family, Ireland, the civil rights in Northern Ireland. All of that came through the example of the black civil rights movement in America. So definitely people can inspire people across borders. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to give it a go. And so I feel a little bit like, we've got all these people. A lot of them aren't in the Linke. Now, I was in the SPD with North Hawkall, and we got a lot of people leaving now. All I can say is that when people leave the SPD, now either the SPD just dies, and the Linke grows to 40%. Now, it ain't happening. I heard that apparently Captain Kipping says, man hat sich stabilisiert. Now, stabilizing yourself when the SPD is sort of crumpling into nothing is not the greatest position to be in. You should be growing. Now, I would say join the SPD because we need to, there is the potential. The SPD is not an inherently neoliberal party because, well, if it was, then so was Labour and so was the Democrats, and now Bernie's running. And, there's everything to play for. We can flip this party around. You'd be surprised if you go to the SPD that there are a lot of seriously left-wing people there. God knows how they've stood it all those years. I find it difficult, but there we are. So to your point about having a position, I also have a position, I did say it briefly, on immigration. I think the status of illegality creates a division in the working class which is damaging and harmful. Yeah? So yes, absolutely, I was a first-class immigrant, or I am a first-class immigrant. And if you start looking at really cool trade union stuff like Susie Neumann, who just died, who's fantastic. She organised the cleaning women in Gelsenkirchen, in the Ruhr Valley, in the Ruhrpott, and half of her ladies, they're not ethnically German. Of course, they're cleaning ladies, and those are the fights we've got to win. And we need to have migrant voices at the front, leading as well the idea that it's just somehow we'll do a bit of solidarity on the side. Not at all. The question is, however, and maybe this is a different cultural question, is within broad party systems, like a bi-party system like we have in America or in the UK, is we talk about a broad church. Like Bevan, who founded the NHS, so the National Health Service in Britain, who was one of the great socialist politicians, says politics is the language of priorities, yeah? Because you've got to have a kind of list. For me, somehow like peace and justice, pretty good. If you have peace and justice and migration and energy policy and transport, and as soon as someone falls out, then you're going to have problems. Because what you have in Germany is through the mosaic of political positions, you have a position, say, on migration, and then you meet the doctors from Mecklenburg-Vorpommern who agree with you about 90% of things, and there's 10% you don't agree with. If you're going to say, no, sorry, I think that's a racist position, you've got a problem. And you've got a similar problem with open borders, that at the moment Corbyn's Labour Party does not support open borders. I personally feel we should be fighting for freedom of movement, and the problem is not freedom of movement people, the problem is freedom of movement capital. That's what we need to be talking about. That's another thing. But we've got to find how we hold this conversation, because otherwise the danger is the Christmas dinner. I have a position which is different from yours, and we are only going to win. You have a social majority for peace and justice in Germany. You do not have a social majority for Die Linke. Yeah? Now, definitely fight for your positions within an alliance, but you have to let an alliance form. Because otherwise you get the tiny little campfires and a weak, splintered left who will go on failing and failing and failing and letting neoliberalism survive for much too long. So how do you have the conversation? I think changing the conversation is a possible way forward. Not because, let's say I meet someone, and they think that they've got a different position on immigration. Let's say I meet Bernie Sanders. He does not believe in open borders. Am I going to have a conversation with Bernie Sanders? You bet I am. Yeah? Now, you can say, I think this and I think this, but if you start, and that's the trouble with anti-racism, is it sometimes has become shrill and intolerant. And if you look at...
Sorry.
There are people who are going out there changing people's minds. But if you start a conversation, you have to be able to listen to people. Is the moment, the whole right wing, it lives from this thing of, they don't even let me talk. They shout me down, yeah? Now, talk. Now, I'm not saying that racism is right. I hope my comrades would say that I'm fundamentally opposed to it. But we've got to change people's minds. And preventing them from speaking at the moment is actually driving them to the AFD. Now, they're not right, but it's just a fact. There is a lot of racism out there in society. Yeah? So how are we going to deal with it? And if you say, I've got my position, and as soon as you deviate from my position, I'm going to condemn you, that's the problem. So, Aufstehen, is it a perfect vehicle? No. As the Linke is not a perfect vehicle. It is one part of a large social coalition which could force a terribly meaningful change in Germany. We need it. We need it internationally. Change is coming, but we have to provide vehicles for that change, and we have to take as many people as possible, because we're going to win when we get a social majority. Not by pandering to racism. We have to fight racism all the way, because we've got to come together to kick up and not kick down. But there are ways to change that conversation. For instance, with this thing of, do you want to kick down or do you want to kick up? And then you can win people to your side. Yeah? So that's what I hope we can do. I'm sure you're going to tell me in the bar that I'm doing something wrong. And you know what? If you can convince me you've got a better idea and that I should leave the 160,000 people and go do something else, if you can convince me it's a better idea, I'm up for it. Aufstehen is only a means to an end, as any party is only a means to an end. It's not about the party, it's not about this name, it's not about any personal politicians or someone's careers. It's about making change happen. That is all I'm concerned with. I hope that's what the Gilets Jaunes are concerned with, until they start getting represented in Parliament as well. And I really hope that we can all pull together. I think that we agree on so much. We can all pull together to make shit happen, because that's our objective. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. Right, now,